4. Now that we have had a quick and dirty introduction to the Psalms and an introduction to what lament is, and we've had some time to dwell in lament, to see what it feels like to us collectively and personally, now let's look at what Pemberton calls the contours of lament. So when we are ready to be brutally honest with God, when we are willing to let go of any of our own expectations and need for control, when we have nothing else left to lose, and we're ready to trust God with what we're experiencing, with our suffering, with our pain, it is a moment of hope to have a structure or a architecture with which we can cling on to in order to lament personally and collectively. So that's what the contours of lament are. It's a way for us to have a outline, some control, though very little, when everything's in chaos and when we have no control. It's a way for us to be in conversation with the Holy One, the one who brought order into chaos, and a way to speak to the Holy One and beg for God to bring order into the chaos of our lives. So let's look at that. But first, let us pray. Long enough, Lord. You've ignored me long enough. I've looked at the back of your head long enough. Long enough, I've carried this ton of trouble, lived with a stomach full of pain. Long enough, my arrogant enemies have looked down their noses at me. Take a good look at me. God, my God, I want to look life in the eye, so no enemy can get the best of me or laugh when I fall on my face. I've thrown myself headlong into your arms. I am celebrating your rescue. I'm singing at the top of my lungs. I'm so full of answered prayers. Amen. Okay, so what are the contours of lament? What is the structure of lament? What is the outline of lament? Well, let's look at it. Most laments in the Psalms follow a pattern. It begins with an address to God, long enough, Lord. Moves into a complaint, whether it be a complaint against God, against our enemies or the wicked ones, those autonomous ones who are a law unto themselves, or even a complaint about my own choices and behavior, my sinfulness. From there, it moves into a request. What is it that we're wanting? When we're in the pit, what are we calling out for God to do? Save us, O Lord. Discipline me no longer, Lord. Relieve me of this. Give me a little bit of hope. Throw me a life jacket. What is it you want God to do for you? Then comes the bargaining, right? What is the motivation for Yahweh to not only hear us, but to answer our request, right? Really bargaining with God, wrestling with Yahweh. And lastly is this moment of confidence and praise, knowing that God not only hears us and can handle what we're saying, but will indeed provide for us and fulfill the covenant that has been promised to us, right? Remember the covenant. I will be your God and you will be my people. Just like we make a covenant in any relationship, right? We are celebrating the commitment that is there. So let's look at Psalm 13. And if you want to take a moment to pause and grab a Bible or to look it up on your device, we're going to be reading Psalm 13. I like the NRSV version, but I've been reading from the Message, and I will also sometimes read John Goldingay's interpretation straight from the Hebrew. So that's what I'll be looking at. Okay, so Psalm 13. Let's break it down. What is the address to God? So if you look in the first verse, it's, how long, Yahweh? Long enough, Yahweh. There are times when we will address God collectively, naming God in God's majesty and might, or naming God based on God's past behavior. There's also those times when the Holy Spirit has to intervene for us because all we have are the sighs and the moans of our experience because we cannot name what is happening. So it may just be a calling out in the night. And I feel like it's a lot like those moments when, as a child, in the dark, you wake from a nightmare and you're in a panic and you're still not exactly sure what is real and what is not. And in that moment, screaming out, Mommy or Daddy, right? The one that I love and knows me and that I turn to for protection, right? Abba, Father, Yahweh, Elohim, Adonai, right? My beloved, right? How long, Yahweh? And then we move to the complaint. And looking at Psalm 13, the question is the complaint against God? Is the complaint against the wicked ones or my enemies? Or is the complaint something more personal? So we can look at verse 1 and 2, right? Will you ignore me forever? Will you hide your face from me? How long must I lay up plans in my spirit, other people's plans? How long do I have to lay up trouble in my heart all day long? How long will my enemies stand high over me? The initial complaint is to God, right? When we talked about lament and what that looked like, there was often a list of things that we hear over and over and over again in the laments that are accusations against God, right? Will you ignore me forever? Will you hide your face from me? Why is your behavior not divine but seems more like the humans in my life? Why have you abandoned me? Why are you so far away from me, right? These are a list of complaints against God as a way of expressing lament of absence, right? This is supposed to be our most intimate relationship. You are my God and I am your people, and yet I feel that you are silent. I feel that you have left me or abandoned me. I feel all alone. Then we move to the request portion. If you look at verse 3, what are we asking God to do? Right? Take note. Answer me. Pay attention to me, Lord. Listen to me. Hear me, what I'm saying. Yahweh, you're my God. Give light to my eyes, right? Revive me. Return life to me. Give me sight of where you are working in my life, lest I sleep to death, right? Or else I will die. Then we look to the motivation, right? And this is the bargaining part. What's in it for Yahweh, right? We're not talking about the motivation for me to cry out. or for us collectively to cry out. But what is it that's going to motivate God? Lest I sleep in death. Look at verse 3 and 4. Lest my enemies say, I have finished him off. Lest my foes celebrate because I fall down. Right? You know, Walter Brueggemann has a list of things that are commonly seen in the Psalms of Lament about motivations for God, right? What is the psalmist or the speaker saying that will motivate God to move, right? So there's a couple of things. Yahweh's reputation, right? Think about the honor, shame code and culture that are not only our early church, but our early ancestors in faith lived in, right? So when we hear in Psalm 15, lest my enemies say, I have finished him off, or my foes celebrate because I fall down, the motivation is to coerce God, because if not, and I die and my enemies prevail, then you have mud in your eye, right? You look like a loser. You look like a God who cannot be the Almighty One, the Sovereign One. If I lose, they win, and you are put to shame, and your name is put to shame, not just me, God. Another motivation for God's intervention would be consistency with how Yahweh has previously acted, right? Yahweh is the God who led the Hebrew people out of slavery, passing through the waters on dry land into the Sinai. You have redeemed us before, time and time again. Please redeem us now, right? Be our Redeemer based on our precedent that we have in our relationship. It could be that the speaker finally acknowledges their guilt. Intervene because I know that my sinfulness is the reason why these consequences are so uncomfortable. Or it could be the opposite. God, I've done nothing wrong, right? Think about the story of Job. Lord, what is it that I have done to make you so angry? I have been a righteous man from my birth. It could also be a promise of praise, right? I will praise you voluntarily. I will go to the temple and I will sing the mighty acts that you have done in my life. I will tell everybody how great my God is. It could be the helplessness of the speaker. I'm in the pit. I can do nothing for myself. I am literally on my deathbed. My bones have withered inside of me. I have no strength. You are my only hope, right? What a great Star Wars image, right? Obi-Wan, you're our only hope, right? Yahweh, you're our only hope. And lastly, it's the speaker's trust in God, right? Because you are my God and I am your people, because you are our God and we are your people, because of all the things that you have done in the past for us, because of our intimate relationship with one another, I trust in you. I know that you will be faithful because you've always been faithful to me. You know, a very good friend of mine told me, trust is consistency over time. Trust is consistency over time. It is a long laying of a foundation, but in the end, it is a strong foundation. Trust in God. So if we look back at Psalm 13, the motivation is, my enemies will celebrate if I lose. You will not be the one who is celebrated, right? And then lastly, what is the confidence or the praise in Yahweh that the speaker in Psalm 13 is saying? And if we look, there is this hinge moment between verse 4 and 5, right? There's a complete reversal, right? We're hearing, lest my foes celebrate because I fall down. And immediately it is, But I myself trust in your commitment, right? My heart will celebrate your deliverance. Our speaker assumes that deliverance will automatically come. I will sing to the Lord, right? A promise of praise. Because God has done all that should be done for me, right? There is trust, there is celebration, and there is praise for an answered prayer. I'm assuming the prayer will be answered before I even finish speaking. You know, the contours of lament reminded me of the stages of grief. And like the stages of grief, there is no prescription about how to go through the stages of grief or how long each one lasts, but you cannot rush through them or skip over them, right? For those who are familiar with the stages of grief, right, it's this idea that there's denial. He's not dead. And then anger. How the hell did that happen? There's bargaining. God, please no, take me. There's depression. I want to die. I don't want to even breathe or get out of bed without my beloved. And then there's acceptance. I don't like what has happened, but I'm still alive. And my God is with me, right? I see those mirrored so much in these contours of what Lent is, especially this bargaining piece, right? It's very much like this motivation here. Like, what is it that I need to do to convince God to come to be with me where I am in my pain and suffering? And this idea of anger definitely comes in our complaint, whether we're angry at God, or we're angry at the people in our life, or we're angry at the circumstances, or we're angry with ourselves. I cannot believe that I did that again. I promised myself that I wouldn't, right? And this idea of acceptance really steps in here for this confidence, right? The acceptance is, I know that God is with me. Even if I am in the very pit of Sheol, right? Even if I am knocking on death's door, I trust that God is with me. So, let's take a moment and look at Psalm 54 and see if we can find those contours. So let's look at Psalm 54. I'm going to read it to you from Golden Gaze, Psalms for Everyone. He has done the English interpretation straight from the Hebrew according to his studies. God, deliver me by your name. By your might, decide for me. God, listen to my plea. Give ear to the words of my mouth. Because aliens have risen up against me, terrifying people have sought my life. People who have not put God in front of them. There. God is my helper. The Lord is the very sustainer of my life. May he make the evil come back to the people who are watching for me. In your truthfulness, wipe them out. With a voluntary offering, I will sacrifice to you. I will confess your name, Yahweh, because it is good. Because it has rescued me from every trouble, and my eye has looked at my enemies. Okay, so let's go through it. What is the address? So it starts with God, Yahweh, Elohim. And later on we hear in verse 2, God, listen to my plea, Adonai. Then we move to the complaint. And who is the complaint against? Is it against God? Is it against the wicked ones? Is it against my behavior? The complaint is in verse 3. Aliens have risen up against me. Terrifying people have sought my life. People who have not put God in front of them. Remember what we said about those who are the wicked ones? They're autonomous, right? They are a law unto themselves. It's difficult to trust somebody who is their own law and judge and lawyer, right? What's the accountability for someone who only sees themselves as an authority? And then the third is the request. What is the community asking God in Psalm 54? Right there at the beginning. Deliver me. By your might, decide for me. Verse 2. Listen to my plea. Give ear to the words of my mouth. And again, it moves down to make him the evil that come back to the people who are watching for me. In your truthfulness, wipe them out, right? Give them what they deserve, Lord. And as far as I'm concerned, annihilate them. Get rid of them, Lord. And what's the motivation? I will confess your name, Yahweh, because it is good. God, you are good. You do good things for your good people. It is good to confess your name, Lord. I will voluntarily offer up sacrifice to you. Right here it is, a promise of praise. Right? I'm not going to do it because I am required to do it. I will do it because I want to do it. And in that way, I will shame those around me who are the evil ones. Yahweh has delivered me and rescued me from every trouble. Again, we see this, consistency with God's previous actions. Look at that last verse, 7. Because God has rescued me from every trouble, not just this one. And lastly, there's this confidence. There, right there in verse 4. God is my helper. The Lord is the very sustainer of my life. I know you will do it, Lord. This psalmist has confidence that the plea given to God, even though it is risky to trust God, will indeed be taken care of. Right? Trust equals consistency over time. Do you think that we can look at Psalm 22 and find any of these contours? Let's find out. So Psalm 22 is one that we hear, especially during Palm Sunday and throughout Holy Week. And I'm really interested in what you think about this lament and the contours or the structure of lament in the Psalms. Before we look at it, I want you to be thinking about some of those common complaints against God that we talked about, right? There's this question of, why are you so far away, Lord? How long will you allow this to go on? I mean, how many times have we said that to God? Especially in the past couple weeks. How long will you allow this to go on? Why do you act more human than divine, right? Why do you not intervene? Why do I feel like you are not acting out of your sovereignty, but like a human being, Lord, and my relationships with others? Are you punishing me? Are you giving me the silent treatment? Are you disciplining me? Right? Why are you hiding? Why can't I find you? Why have you rejected me? Boy, we really hear that in Psalm 22, don't we? Jesus on the cross. And then, why are you so angry, Lord? I'm suffering and this is painful. Are you punishing me? So instead of going through like we have the past 2 times with each one, I just want to read the first part of Psalm 22 and be thinking about these common complaints against God and tell me if that echoes for you in this psalm. My God, why have you abandoned me? Far away from delivering me from the word I yell. My God, I call by day, but you do not answer. And by night, there is no quietness in me. But you are enthroned as the Holy One, the great praise of Israel. In you our ancestors trusted. They trusted and you rescued them. To you they cried out and they escaped. And in you they trusted and they were not shamed. But I am a worm, not a person, an object of reviling for humanity, an object of contempt for the people. All who see me mock me, open their mouth, shake their head. He should commit it to Yahweh. He must rescue him. He must save him because he delights in him. Because you are the one who enabled me to break out of the womb, enabled me to trust at my mother's breast. On you I was thrown from birth. From my mother's womb, you were my God. Do not be far from me, because trouble is near and there is no one to help. Many bulls have surrounded me. Mighty Bashan steers have encircled me. Tearing and roaring lions have opened their mouth to me. I have spilled out like water. All my bones have become loose. My mind has become like wax. It has melted inside me. My strength has withered like a piece of pot. My tongue sticks to my palate. You have put me into death's dirt because dogs have surrounded me. An assembly of evil people have surrounded me. My hands and feet are shriveled. I can count all my bones while those people take note and see me. They divide my clothes for themselves. For my garments they cast lots. That's just part of Psalm 22. But did you hear the contours? Did you hear the address, the complaint, the many complaints, the requests, the motivation, the confidence in God? The laments are a collective human experience. Right? There is universal truth in our suffering and our pain. That's why I feel it's so important that it have a structure for us collectively to enter into, right? It's the opposite coin of that feeling you get when you are caught up in a moment of rejoicing, like when your team wins the World Series, or when everyone is singing the national anthem, right? It is the opposite side. It is that moment, that feeling, that opportunity for us to not just rejoice together, but to mourn and grieve together. So here is your coursework for this particular week, right? As a part of our Lenten discipline. I want you to look at Psalm 38, Psalm 41, and together we'll look at Psalm 88. And I want you to diagram them out. right? Kind of like we used to do sentence diagrams back in school. I want you to read through them and look at the contours of lament and find where the pattern holds in Psalm 38 and in Psalm 41. A couple of things that came up for me when I was looking at Psalm 38 that I found so interesting. One of the commentators said that Psalm 38 is the lament of the addict, right? For those who maybe are in AA, for those who have addiction issues when it comes to their relationships or their money or with their image. It's a lament that the complaint is personal, right? And then Psalm 41, it's very interesting because it speaks from a place of illness or a place of pain. Are you feeling pain in your life right now? Is this a moment in time when illness is at the forefront of our thinking? What are the complaints? What are the requests? What's the motivation for God to intervene? How can we praise God even in times like these? And then Psalm 88. I'd like for us to look at it together, but also I want you to spend some time dwelling in Psalm 88, in the lament of Psalm 88, the way we did with Lectio Divina. Read it to yourself again and again and again, and listen to what the Spirit is saying to you. What is the Spirit calling you to do? Where is the Spirit speaking to you specifically in this moment in time in your life? So, shall we look at 88 together? I'm going to read Psalm 88 from the Message. It's a little bit different. It's not the truest representation of the original language, but it definitely is effective in speaking to our experience, I feel. One of the things that I also found interesting is hearing this lament with a female voice, right? As if the speaker is a female. Does it change the way that you understand it? Okay. Looking at the psalm from our book of Psalms, right? Not just the Jewish collection of hallelujahs or praise, but you can see that it starts off with it's a prayer of Haman, and we know for a fact that Haman was a temple leader, probably a worship leader in the temple. He's mentioned in 1 Chronicles 6. So just a reminder that these psalms are like our hymn book, right? It's a way for the community to collectively speak to God and be in conversation. And one last thing about Psalm 88. This may be one of the most extreme examples of lament that we have in the Psalms. Can you tell me why? Psalm 88 from the Message. God, you're my last chance of the day. I spent the night on my knees before you. Put me on your salvation agenda. Take notes on the trouble I'm in. I've had my fill of trouble. I'm camped on the edge of hell. I'm written off as a lost cause. One more statistic. A hopeless case. Abandoned as already dead. One more body to the stack of corpses. And not so much as a gravestone. I'm a black hole in oblivion. You've dropped me into a bottomless pit, sunk me in a pitch black abyss. I'm battered senseless by your rage. relentlessly pounded by your waves of anger. You turned my friends against me, made me horrible to them. I'm caught in a maze and can't find my way out, blinded by tears of pain and frustration. I call to you, God. All day I call. I wring my hands. I plead for help. Are the dead a live audience for your miracles? Do ghosts ever join the chorus that praise you? Does your love make any difference in a graveyard? Is your faithful presence noticed in the corridors of hell? Are your marvelous wonders ever seen in the dark? Your righteous ways noticed in the land of no memory? I'm standing my ground, God, shouting for help at my prayers every morning, on my knees each daybreak. Why, God, do you turn a deaf ear? Why do you make yourself scarce? For as long as I remember, I've been hurting. I've taken the worst you can hand out, and I've had it. Your wildfire anger has blazed through my life. I'm bleeding, black and blue. You've attacked me fiercely from every side, raining down blows till I'm nearly dead. You made lover and neighbor alike dump me. The only friend I have left is darkness. It doesn't easily follow the contours, does it? But the address is there, right? It begins with calling out to God, to Yahweh. My God who delivers. And what are the complaints? The psalmist is suffering and fearful at death's door, buried, as good as gone. Even like a warrior spent, right? Like one who has no oomph left. Like a body that has been just dumped on the side of the road. Right? One that's not given proper burial. I had images of genocide. Individuals and humanities tossed away. And what's the request? Hear me, Lord. Just hear me. I'm at a point where I'm not going to give up, and I just need to know that you are out there. And the motivation for Yahweh. Is God absent in the land of the dead? Because one cannot praise God from the grave. If God is a God of life, is God present in death? And then the confidence. Where is the praise that we saw in Psalm 13, that hinge moment when a corner is turned and the speaker has confidence in God's presence or relief in the intimacy of that commitment made by God? Where is that? We don't really see it, do we? The confidence is unspoken, I believe. In such moments of pain and sorrow, being laid low, identifying with the dirt, it takes twice as much faith to call out to God and not to completely give up. This is what I've said to y'all before, but this is the idea of the ship patch theology, right? When you are so sunken, you feel like you are up to here in just wastefulness, like you've been thrown into the dump in a pile of refuse, right? That idea of Golgotha, the burning trash where there's nothing good there. The ship patch theology is, it's so dark and it's so hard for me to understand where I am and what's happening. I cannot possibly see that I'm in a compost pile. All I know is that it stinks, Lord. But there is life in the compost pile, right? Because it's fertilizer. God is with us at all times and all places, even when I don't feel it or understand it. The speaker of Psalm 88 surely must understand that crazy seed experience, to be buried down in the deep darkness like a womb, not knowing which way is up, not knowing when the springtime will come. And yet, when the time does come that God allows us to burst out with new life, to look around the garden and see that I'm not alone, and that everything that I needed, God had given to me and was with me the whole time. And now I can blossom and grow from my experience being buried as a seed. Or like the chrysalis. Surely the chrysalis must wonder what the hell is going on when the transformation, the metamorphosis happens from caterpillar to butterfly. What kind of pain and dissolving must happen inside the chrysalis? The breaking open, the rendering apart. And yet, when the butterfly emerges, it is able to fly. I can only imagine the speaker of this psalm is begging God, please be with me as I am buried like a seed. So for this session, for this discipline, for this week of Lent, instead of watching a clip or going through a contemplation exercise, I want you to be challenged this week to listen for lament. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples for where you can listen. So the first one that pops to mind for me is a song by Tori Amos called God. And the lyrics of the song are, God, sometimes you just don't come through. Listen to music. Where do you hear lament in our culture through our music? Where do you hear it in our hymnody, in our churches? Where do you hear it in the songs that your neighbors sing? In the gospel music that came out of the Southern Black Church. Listen for lament. I want you to also listen for it in our prayers. One of the prayers that St. George and Leeds used as an example for lament is one that they wrote for their lighthouse ministries. And it's ministries for those who are dealing with addiction, who are struggling with homelessness, or who need some extra support. And we'll put that up on the website or link it or do something so that you can see that for yourself. But where else in our prayers do you hear lament, individually and collectively? What about poetry? I'm going to read to you a poem that was written by a woman named Susan Vollmer at the death of her wife. And we'll also link it up so you can look at it. But where are you hearing lament in poetry? Or an even broader question is, where are you seeing lament in our art? In the creative ways that our makers are expressing themselves, not just for themselves individually, but for the wider community, for the collective whole. Right? Think about Banksy's graphic street art. Where's the lament in that? Let me read this to you real quick. And then there's one last place that I want you to be thinking about listening for lament. This is called God's Silence by Susan Vollmer. Where the hell were you as she retched with nausea and writhed with pain? Where were you when we read poor prognosis or heard metastatic liver cancer? Where were you? Where were you when we needed you? We thought that you'd help us, that you'd heal her or strengthen me. We thought that prayer and touch could change things. Ask and you shall receive. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. For she who asks receives. She who seeks finds. Except for us, I guess. We asked. We sought. We knocked. We begged. Bargained and pleaded. We cried and sobbed. Help us. Save her. Heal her. And what did we receive? Silence. We begged you to save her, to spare her, for a life that had been well lived, for a woman of great faith with hope and promise, but you turned a deaf ear to us. You ignored our cries and pleas. You stood in silence, the untouchable one, removed and distant from her pain, aloof. You can create a tree, but you can't save a loved one. You're not who I thought you were. My heart breaks with disappointment. Disillusion surrounds me. I feel like a fool, cast out of the game. May I never be made fool again. How much does this sound like Psalm 88? And the last place I want you to listen for lament is in the eschatological reality of the already but not yet. Right? As Christians, we have a hope and we have faith that the things that we hope for, even in the evidence of it not being seen, will indeed come to fruition. Right? That's the hope of the cross. That's the hope of resurrection. That Friday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, that's not the end of the story. The hope is that this is not the end of the story. The already not yet is that we know the war has been won, but we're still fighting a battle. So the challenge for you to listen for lament is in your own life. Where is the already but not yet of your own experience?